Okay, thank you. Here, hope I am audible now. And it is poetry, the lecture on NetSet. It is part 5. As it is part 5, earlier I have already mentioned you that there are about 20 to 25 questions are based on poetry. So this kind of questions, what kinds of questions are asked generally? We try for the patterns of questions. After all, appearing for NET or SET exam, some tactics we need for assumption. What types of questions would be asked? And that's what I try to collect some of the questions from the previous question papers so that we can get idea of what types of questions are there, what ways are there to ask questions. Sometimes I say, if it is the questions here, my intention is that to let you know what types of questions are there, and the questions we can sometimes I say the questions, the patterns. If you see the patterns, here the question number 1, that is, which among the following is an incomplete poem by P.B. Shelley? Okay. So the question is related to romantic poetry. Now the pattern is already changed. The format of the question papers, the format of the syllabus is already changed. And the certain topics are given to you, just like poetry, drama, fiction, non-fictional prose, cultural studies, then critical studies, theory after post-World War II, and so on. So here, the intention is that of asking the question, romantic poetry, the school of romantic poetry should be covered. See, so many years are already happened, so many exams are already taken, so many exams are already conducted. And after that, asking the questions on certain topics is a challenging one. But still, the types of questions, they just try to innovate, and different ways of asking they try for that. So here is the question, for example, which among the following is an incomplete poem by P.B. Shelley? So when we say P.B. Shelley, so P.B. Shelley belongs to romantic tradition, school of romantic poetry. And as we see in literature, basically it is assumed that from lyrical ballads, which was published in 1798, the romantic tradition has been started. But it is not any kind of hard and fast watertight compartment, as we call 1798, and not earlier, the poems of that tradition were not written. But this period from 1798 to about in the mid of 1840s. So this period is known in literary history as a romantic period. So we share some common characteristics for the common characteristics of romantic poetry, and we find the pre-romantic poets like William Blake, and there are so many. But the lyrical ballads, the publication of lyrical ballads, which was yes, the lyrical ballads, which was published in 1798. And we see the major romantic poets, William Wordsworth, E.S.T. Coleridge, P.B. Shelley, Lord Byron, John Keats, and so on. So we find all these major poets and their artifacts or their poems. So here is the question which is asked: P.B. Shelley's poetry, and which poem is incomplete? Of course, the other poems we find of P.B. Shelley, some of them. Here, The Triumph of Life is an incomplete poem. Here is another poem. See the pattern of questions. Match the following, or this kind of match the following we find here. Earlier the questions were asked like this, a single example will be given to you, and or a verse line will be given to you, and you will be asked that what type of or what kind of figures of speech is used in this line. But now the examples are given to you, and you have to match them with the options. See, here we have to guess for that one. Generally, students are aware of simile and assonance like this. So find out what is simile, where is simile. In the D section, you'll find an ice mast high, come floating by, as green as emerald. So here, as it is a direct comparison, and we get that the option D, of course, the second option is there. There is assonance, thou still unravished bride of quietness. Assonance in the sense that the repetition of the same consonant sound we find here. So the repetition, it is the initial, it is as we have already studied earlier. While studying poetry, we have to concentrate on the elements of poetry. Just like this, you have to eliminate which options. Now D is second. So like this, you can find out antithesis, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. These three terms are generally used. Anti, that means the opposite ideas are there. Irony. So irony, of course, that is a figure of speech. The statement is something, but ironical, the sense is something else, and which is used. All the figures of speech are used, and there is the intention by the poet. Of course, here is the deserted village by Oliver Goldsmith. Here is the next question, that is the question number 3. So here, the deserted village by Oliver Goldsmith, it is a long poem and which is about rural life and all this. So Oliver Goldsmith is famous for his novels as well, The Vicar of Wakefield and all this. So you can find out the answer and how they, of course, it is about rural life, it is about simple life. So it does not talk about urban life and all this. So here he tries to go ahead with the rural life of people, and here again, now the earlier the second question was there, and here again you will find they match the following or the definitions, and the question is asked very trickily. identify the correct combination among the following. So the question is asked on meter. The question is asked on meter. When we say it is asked on meter, what I had already said, for elements of poetry, first lexical and thematic dimensions we have to think: diction, rhetorical figures, and theme. Then visual dimensions, stanzas, concrete poetry, either we see it or not. Visualize, for example, Easter Wings, that is the poem, which is the best example of visual effects, for visual effects. Rhythmic and acoustic dimensions, rhyme, meter, onomatopoeia. So here is meter and how meter is there in poems. Now see, identify the correct combination among the following. So here, spondy, it consists of 3 stressed syllables, it is wrong. B, ferric, it consists of 2 unstressed syllables, it is correct. C, amphimaslar, it is a metrical foot of 3 syllables. Then choriambus, it is a foot for verse consisting of 2 stressed syllables enclosing 2 unstressed syllables. And the 5th option that is you are asked, that is trochaic. It has a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed one. So the answer is B, C, and E. Now the pattern of MCQ, the objective kind of answers, you will made confused. The questions, some of them will be asked simple questions, some of them are moderate questions, and some of them are difficult questions. So this comes under this difficult type of question, what I feel so. So here B, C, and E, these are the options which are correct. Now you will find it little bit challenging. So for this type of questions, you have to refer the book, that is the Poetry Handbook. It is by John Leonard, J-O-H-N, John Leonard, L-E-N-N-A-R-D, John Leonard. So this book focuses on poetry, and it is the Poetry Handbook. Okay, so the answer is B, C, and E. And these questions were asked in previous question papers. So dear friends, remember now, the level of difficulty is the real challenge for us. But when we get the idea that what sort of questions, what type of questions, what patterns of questions would be asked, so we can guess and have the idea in our mind. Okay, so here, now it is another type of question. See, the earlier question was asked on individual poet, that was P.B. Shelley. He was the one of the famous romantic poets. And now Tennyson. See, here Alfred Lord Tennyson. What does he say? There is no reference of any poem and all this, but still the question is asked. 8, I doubt not through the ages one increasing purpose runs, and the thoughts of men are widened with the process of the suns. See, the question we find, some lines are basic, or the central pivotal lines are taken from his poems, one of the poems. And see here, Tennyson's personality, his personal life, and what did he think about the Victorian age? What was his perception? So Tennyson is remembered for his famous poem In Memoriam. There are certain dramatic monologues like Ulysses, Tithonus, and all this. Some short poems are there, and he was very much disturbed by his friend's death, Arthur Hallam. And when we say Arthur Hallam, he was an intimate friend, but at the same time, the Victorian era, there was a Victorian conflict. So what kind of conflict was there in Victorian era? So there was a clash between faith and religion, faith or religion and science and or reason. So the Darwin's theory was there, and industrialization, urbanization. These are some of the characteristic features of Victorian era. And of course, there was a tradition of romantic age which was carried forward or extended to a certain extent. And Tennyson, he had expressed himself, but he used to believe that though there is a scientific advancement, and to try to avoid the clash between or the conflict between science and religion, or faith and reason. So he believes in faith after all, and that's what we find the conclusions of his poems, or the concluding lines we find. For example, Ulysses, to seek, to find, like this, he ends with optimism. So he reflects on the faith, and he does not at the same time neglect the development in science as well, but he is an optimistic poet. So the question is on what Tennyson and the Victorian era used to think, that is the reflection through the poems. I had already mentioned that there would be about 20 to 25 questions related to poetry. Now here is another question you can find. So what is the question here? It is a simple question. And this simple question, we see here the heroic couplet is a pair of. So again, come back to the point earlier I mentioned, the elements of poetry, how the questions are asked. How the questions are asked. So here is the question on stanzas, rhymes. Couplet is a kind of stanza form. Couple, couplet. Two lines are together. They are rhymed together, and that's what they are couplet. You see Shakespeare's sonnets and the structure of Shakespeare's sonnets. You will find that the rhyme scheme AB, CD, EF, GG, that is the couplet rhymed together, which encapsulates the theme of that particular sonnet. So the types of stanzas, and here is a couplet, the group of lines, verse lines. So what is here? So what is a heroic couplet? So heroic couplet we find, and here 4 options are given. So these options, out of this, they can make you little bit confused. So take care of this one. And what is heroic couplet? So you can find out the 4 options. They are rhymed together. Okay. So option C, that is not correct answer. Remaining 3. Now see, there is a kind of ellipsis we can say, and we can ellipse while we answer. So the unnecessary burden we can avoid. There the heroic means it's a form, it is in iambic pentameter, and so rhymed 2 lines which were iambic pentameter, we call it heroic couplet. So this type of questions, see, it is a simple question. It is not difficult one, but the question is asked instead of, it is asked in terms of syllable. So each syllable, either, I mean, from a verse line, either they attract or carry stress. So iambic pentameter, you can unstressed stress syllables. It is a structure of 5 syllables together, and that's what pentameter is there. So here you have the concept of heroic couplet, and then now here the question, next question, the next type of question is there. So what is that? Which of the following is not true about lyrical ballads? See, the trick is used here, and so earlier the earlier question, heroic couplet. So it is an iambic pentameter rhymed verse line, 2 lines which are rhymed together. Here, that was a simple question, but now see how the trick is used here. Which of the following is not true about lyrical ballads? So far we are aware of lyrical ballads. We feel that it is the manifesto of romanticism and the introduction. That is a preface, and which states the intention and the language and the subject of poetry and all this, which discusses. So here, what is not true about the poem? Sorry, not true about lyrical ballads. See, in all the questions, suppose there are 100 questions, 4 or 5 questions, or maybe more than that, about 10 questions, you will find that there will be not will be asked. Generally, students find that in an excitement, they do not read the question properly, and there is the ellipsis of not sometimes, and then students can go wrong. But instead of that, you have to read the question very carefully. If you read the question carefully and then go ahead. So here, what is not true? So it is a manifesto of romantic poetry. It is true. It turns English poetry away from social and intellectual sophistication of the 17th and 18th century poetry. Of course, it is a reaction towards neoclassical poetry. It takes poetry out of the confines of reason and intellect to the unravished and unspoiled beauties of nature. Then the fourth option is it is very particular about the form and structure of a poem. So the fourth option is not also. Of course, romantic poetry and the lyrical ballads, which are not, because of it is a democratic reaction. So what is not true? So it is a manifesto, it is true. It is very about the form and structure of the poem, either it is true or not. We have to think, we have to, of course, A is not the answer. It turns English poetry away from social, and it is also true. So what is untrue about lyrical ballads? So here, the D option, and from C and D, you have to choose the correct option. You have to eliminate the wrong options at the same time. So think of the romantic poetry, the contribution of lyrical ballads, and then which is not true about the lyrical ballads. So the answer, it takes poetry out of the confines of reason, is not the answer. See, it is very particular about the form and structure of the poem. So it is not like that. So the answer, you have to give it properly. Now see, the not, that is tricky one. So 3 statements are true about it and 1 is not one. So that is the answer here. Yes, match the following Now again see, match the following. Here the names of the poets and here some lines or one line given by each one. So here again match the following. Now the questions are asked in a complete near about 10 questions are asked like this on poetry, drama, or maybe other on other topics as well. But here regarding poetry, you will find match the following: faces along the bar or cling to their average day. The second one, the full daring of the moment surrender. C, bent double like old beggars under sacks. D, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness. So the statements are given to you, and here the answer is already given below. So A, W.H. Auden, there is a Auden group. They have their own kind of ideology or certain characteristic features of the group are there. So B is second, T.S. Eliot. Then you will find C. Here the answer already given to you. Yes. Now you can match them properly. So I'll go to the next one. Identify the correct ones among the following. This question is on. This question is on Indian poetry. Arun Kolotkar and the other one, that is, what do you call it? Yes, the Arun Kolotkar, Jejuri, we know the famous poem. And so in Ethiopia, I think that is not the answer. So you have to identify the correct. Maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, more than one options are true. So you have to find them in properly about Arun Kolotkar. Of course, Arun Kolotkar's colloquial speech in his poems, we find the qualities to paint pictures, we find the Jejuri, how he is painted. Of course, we have to read and go ahead with Arun Kolotkar. My intention is here is that what type of question is asked to you. So you need close study of Arun Kolotkar. You need the study of Dilip Chitre, Parth-Sarathy, Nissim Ezekiel, and others. So here you'll find yes, there was a little bit doubt I had earlier. Yes. So Arun Kolotkar's poem, you have to read Indian poems and then we can go ahead. So what is correct? So Arun Kolotkar uses colloquial speech in his poems. It's true. Then Kolotkar envisions abstract qualities. It is true. Then private poems in public garden is composed by Dilip Chitre. Now see, here is Dilip Chitre. So A, B, D, these are the correct options. Okay. So earlier, the question which was in the earlier question, I had discussed about Wilfred Owen, T.S. Eliot, Allen Ginsberg, and W.H. Auden. So they are taken from their famous poems. Come back to the next point, and that is Philip Sidney's Arcadia was influenced by. So the answer is the Spanish Romance of Montemayor. So it is also the question, it is a kind of simple question. Yes. Here is a statement. The question is asked like this. The statement, that is, I quote, should poets bicycle dash pump the human heart or squash it flat? Man's love is of man's life a thing apart. Girls aren't like that. So here, the statement which is given to you, and you are expected to answer the correct option. So it is the question, a statement made about, the statement is made about the poems, about the poets. So certain statements like this, you are expected to answer. Donald Davy, Kingsley Amis, Philip Larkin, and John Wynne. You have to find out Philip Larkin's poems, which groups does he belong to. Then you have to read Kingsley Amis. He is famous for his novels, and of course Donald Davy, the movement poets and all these, the latest movements in poetry or the groups, you are expected to think on. And then, so this is how the comment is made by the poets. In the same manner, sometimes the pre-Raphaelite poetry, for example, and the pre-Raphaelite poetry was criticized for as a fleshy school of poetry. So this is a statement like this here. Who is the author of House of Fen? It is a simple question. You can easily answer that one. Which of the collection of poems are not written by Mina Alexander? She is a modern poet. And out of this, again, you can answer from this one. Here, which among the following were poet laureates of England? So the poet laureates, it was the tradition. It is a tradition. And the poets who are appointed as by the royal family. So here, only A and B, these two answers are correct. Alfred Austin and Robert Bridges. Watts Dunton and Oscar Wilde were never poet laureates. Here, the next question, that is, who among the following in the article Fleshy School of Poetry attacked pre-Raphaelites, especially D.G. Rossetti? So here, Robert Buchanan, who criticized pre-Raphaelite poetry. Then, see, friends, these are some of the questions I had already pointed out. And when you study the previous question papers, you will realize how about the type of questions. I think it is, or it should be in our mind, that what kind of questions would be asked. At the same time, here are some of the schools and groups and movements, just like the questions on the movement poets was there, pre-Raphaelite school of poetry is there, the question on P.B. Shelley is there, the question on lyrical ballads is there, or even there are different Victorian poetry, Tennyson is there. So the Cavalier School of Poetry, satanic verses, graveyard poetry. So all these poems you are expected to study the schools, movements, and groups in poetry. So it was my fifth lecture, which is basically focusing on what kinds of questions are expected in your question papers. And through such questions, we can make our own strategy. So anyway, so my intention is to make you understand poetry as one of the components of which is prescribed for NET or SET syllabus. And initially, I already mentioned in the earlier lectures that how the elements of poetry, then related elements or related issues about the elements of poetry. Then I tried to analyze a poem, The Unquiet Love, that is anonymous, and what sort of questions would be asked, and then the types of questions. So I think we must be in a manner, or we must have the mindset of the question paper sitter as well. So this is discussion, and I thank you. If you have any sort of doubt, any sort of questions, you can write to me. You can ask me the questions. You can comment. You can criticize. Of course, there are one or two questions you find a little bit difficult, but it is the level of the questions which are asked, and so we can guess and we can go ahead with that one. So if you have any questions, you can ask me. You can you can call me. My number is given. You can ask your questions in the chat box as well. So about 5 minutes, still there are 3 or 4 minutes are there. So dear friends, there are certain questions I try to point out so that we can get the ideas. In the same manner, you can apply to the other topics, that is drama, then fiction, short story, literary theory, literary criticism, non-prose, non-fictional prose is one of the topic is there. Then you can go ahead with the theory, and there is cultural theory again, which is related or which crosses through all the disciplines: literary theory, criticism, literature, language, and so on. So we'll talk on cultural studies next time. And I think if you have questions, please raise your questions. You can free to ask any questions, or even you can mail me, you can call me, you can give me the feedback. Okay. So with this, I must have stopped now. If you don't have any questions. Okay. Fine. So shall I stop now?